the man. I'm impressed.
All right, everyone. I think our recording is starting. Welcome to our installment of our Citygate Network Insurance Program Teams calls. We try to host these about once a month on a risk-related topic that is of interest. And this is a topic that is of great interest to me. And I know it is to John as well, who works with a lot of you west of the Mississippi. We were super excited at the Citygate National Conference in Orlando to meet Breck Ellison. And Breck will tell you a little bit about himself, but he is one of the few directors of security. That's his job, that's his title, that's what he does at a Citygate Network member ministry. So Breck has, I think, a really extensive background, and he's really good at kind of explaining some of the issues here in really clear and simple ways. So what we're going to do here is kind of interview Breck almost like we were on a radio show or a podcast, and have him tell us about KARM, Knox Area Rescue Ministries. And I'm hearing an echo. Sorry, I think that might be you, but I'm not 100% sure. Maybe you're on in two places.
That work?
Yeah, I think that does the trick. So Breck is going to kind of walk us through what they've done at KARM, and I think he would be the first to tell you, just because they've done it this way at KARM doesn't mean you should do it that way. I think security is one of the most individualized topics in risk management. It depends so much on your location, your population, and staff. Some of you may even find you take different approaches at different locations in the same city or the same neighborhood. But I hope that when you're able to see Breck's process, it will help you as you go through the process at your ministry as well. So without further ado, Breck Ellison. Breck, if you could tell us just a little bit about you and your background and what drew you to KARM, that would be great. And thank you again so much for joining us.
Yeah, no, happy to be here and happy to share. So my name is Breck Ellison. I'm with Knox Area Rescue Ministries in Knoxville, Tennessee. Part of my career was spent in law enforcement. I had a lot of real fun experiences there. I got to be on some special teams, SWAT teams. I was a narcotics officer. Loved that. And then I got out of the law enforcement world and went into low voltage physical security. So think access control systems, camera systems, that thing. From there, I jumped into physical security with guards. So I worked for a security guard provider, a regional company. I consulted for a couple of years, and then I was actually, COVID came. Consulting was hard during COVID. Not a lot of people were doing the large group training things that I kind of specialized in. So I honestly was looking for something like minimum just to kind of cover benefits or something, and ended up interviewing for a safety coordinator position here at KARM, and went through 3 interviews, and I was really confused. This was like an entry-level position. Didn't understand why my last interview was with the senior team. And then they decided to create the director of safety position for me. So I've been at KARM a little over a year now, since last May, and absolutely love it.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think if you could tell us, so when you came in, and just one note, because I'm recording this, if you're not speaking, if you could go off video, that will make the size of the file a little smaller and a little easier to see. Not that we don't love your faces, but it just makes it easier to share afterwards. So thank you. You can, of course, come off mute if you want to interrupt us. We welcome that to ask a question, or you can drop it in the chat. Breck, tell us a little bit about, I guess, your first steps, the first thing you did once you came to KARM. I think what I'm getting at here is, how did you assess your guys' situation try to understand what need for security or lack of security you guys needed?
Yeah, great question. So when I first started, one of the first projects I undertook was a security assessment just of what existed, right? So any map starts with the "you are here," and I kind of needed a clear picture for where we were security-wise. And we were doing some things okay. Some of the things I found we were not doing very well at all. We did have some outside contractors, but we had no written security directives for them. We had no SOPs for them to follow. Everything was kind of very loosely handled. And there was a security really didn't, no one person owned security. There was 2 or 3 people who were kind of involved in the security process. But like we find with most things, sometimes when everybody owns something, no one does. And there was definitely a lot of gaps for us to fill as we started doing that initial assessment.
Okay, so what are the, can you take us through, how did you figure out that there were some gaps? And how did you, many of us might not know a gap when we see one.
Sure. So one of the first things I did was some incident assessments. So taking a look at some of the major security incidents we had over the previous year, and then what have we done to mitigate that risk moving forward. So we had a guest unfortunately physically assault a volunteer. It was completely random, was not targeted, was a mental health issue, but that was a very serious concern. There was bodily injury. So I was able to look at that situation and say, okay, well, what led up to that, and how did we get there? Then how did we as an organization respond? Not just respond in that moment to that situation, but in the weeks since then, what steps were taken to prevent this from coming again? And there was some. Oftentimes, security can be like insurance in that, there's a big incident and there's that tendency to have a knee-jerk reaction, right? And now we need to do all the things, and this is a big priority. But again, with no one running point, it just kind of, well, we're going to get more radios. More staff can have radios, which is a great step. That was important. I tried to review video of the incident and found we had some video, but not a lot of video. So then I started, well, let's look at video and what's important for us to capture. And unfortunately, organizationally at the time, we were using video as a very reactive tool. So we would, wait until there was an incident, and then we would go pull video and see, what happened, how did this happen, which is, it's good. It gives you something to look at, and I'll never complain about data points. But video has come such a long way, especially in the last 3 to 4 years with video analytics. If you're still just using video as that reactive tool, you are really missing out on the capabilities for what you could do. So that incident review led to an entire, video audit for where do we have cameras and what do they do, and then what do we hope they could accomplish for us. And so we ended up replacing our camera system, and it was a sizable investment for us, but now we have a proactive solution, and I'm happy to show you all videos where we've prevented incidents by using facial recognition software and realizing someone's on criminal trespass on the sidewalk before they even get to our front door. So we know before they even get here, this person, not allowed to be here, this could be an issue, and we can respond appropriately. So looking at gaps, you're really just looking at vulnerabilities, right? You're looking at if someone wanted to do something, where are we good? And this is kind of a good, bad, and ugly. No one's perfect. So where do we good? Where are we really solid with our procedures? Where do we have really clear documentation? And then what do we need to have? Again, I found that we were doing a lot of kind of shooting from the hip and a lot of spitballing. So one of the first things I did, can I see if I can share my screen here real quick?
Yeah, no, that'd be great.
All right. Can you all see my screen? Hopefully, maybe.
I can see
you
it.
Can? Great.
I can see
all
it.
right. So one of the first things we did is go through just some basic security directives. So this was like my step one. again, we had contracted security guards, but they had no written, what am I supposed to do? So what we have here is just general post orders, like, there's lots of different things you can call it. Not a really detailed SOP, but just some basic responsibilities. At our main site here, we have a couple different sites, but at our main site here, we have two different posts, two different areas where security would be stationed throughout the day, different hours. So the first thing we did is kind of write this overreaching document just to kind of give a starting point to have, one, it's important to have that written agreement with our security contractor for expectations of what are the guards supposed to do and what is staff responsible for and what are we doing with that. So we developed this document, again, just to kind of have a starting point to have things written. The next thing we
Breck,
did.
if I can interrupt
Sure.
you. So,
Yes.
and for those of you that haven't visited KARM has an extensive day room where folks can come through security. There is a metal detector. There are KARM staff, and then Breck, correct me if I'm wrong, we usually have 2 armed security guards who are not employees.
Correct.
They are
Correct.
contractors who are there to facilitate. So they're not,
Correct.
again, not KARM employees, but I think what's very interesting here is even though they're not your employees, you have an extensive set of guidelines as to what you want them to do and not do.
Absolutely. So in this, you guys may laugh at me, and that's okay. I'm comfortable with that. This document was a really high-level overview. So this is not nitty-gritty. This is not really detailed. For that, we started. See if I can pull up some others here. We started writing SOPs. So what to do if there's a death or suicide on our campus. So we started getting really detailed for different incidents for our guards to actually have an SOP binder they get trained on when they come here. A manager or supervisor will sign off on it that the guard has been trained. And this is a notebook they've got access to anytime they're on post for just, hey, what do we need to do in certain situations? So that took that broad document, the security directives we had, kind of the goals we have for our security team, and started writing SOPs. Now, the problem with SOPs, and I'm sorry, I'll try not to jump around too much here. You start writing SOPs, and then you realize you need a whole lot of SOPs. So you can see here we've got over 80 SOPs. Now, not all of those are for the guards, right? Like, I'm not trying to write a phone book for every single thing they need to do. Some of these are for me. So in certain situations, we have some of these that are for the guards and others are for my position, where if I get hit by a bus, whoever comes after me, or if I'm on vacation, who's ever filling in for me will know what my responsibilities are in any given thing. We combined a lot of these into an organizational, I can blow this up, a crisis management plan. And this was kind of one of the last documents we worked on, and this expanded beyond just our safety and security team. This involved our senior leadership team, different departmental directors, our director of communication, and I'll show you kind of just what this looks like. So if there's a bomb threat to our campus, we, like many of you, we have the bomb cards by the phone to know what to ask the caller, what to listen for, all those standard things. But here's what the staff or volunteer who's on the phone needs to do. Here's what that security officer, so that would be the armed contracted guard, would need to do. My responsibilities for what I'm going to be doing. And then we go on up to other directors and other departments. What is our senior leadership doing? And then what is our communication strategy for the press conference, and what are we going to do with that? So really we made this document. And again, this does not cover every single incident you may have, but we try to think about the major things that may come up. Again, if it's a fire, a bomb threat, we've had guests pass away, overnight, and just what do we do with that? How do we handle that with dignity and make sure that we're, preserving a scene for the medical examiner, but still showing dignity to our guest and working through that. So getting other staff involved was really important. A lot of times I found security can kind of be at odds with everybody else. One of our our KARM principles, we try to exhibit overwhelming biblical hospitality to all of our guests who come in. We want them to feel welcome. And there's definitely some tension in that with security. You know, we want people to feel welcome, but we need to secure our facility and make sure people are safe. So like they mentioned, we do have a metal detector. We do have an x-ray machine for small bags and backpacks and stuff being brought into our facility just so we can search and do that and try to keep things safe. Our guards go through a lot of customer service training and how to deal. You know, it's really a customer service position that happens to have a security function as well. So we don't want typical security. If you go other places in downtown Knoxville, you know, they're going to bark a little bit and give those directives and tell people what to do. And that's not the atmosphere we wanted to have here. So it was really important to us that our guards go through a lot of the same training that our staff goes through on how we're going to care for our guests.
That's great. One quick question from the audience is, are there any other members, paid staff members on your team, or are you really just coordinating your contractors?
Sure. So there is a safety coordinator who's under me. So he's kind of a hybrid between me and the guard. So KARM is very fortunate. I know a lot of missions don't have any dedicated safety or security function. There's two of us full time. That again, that's our sole focus of what we do. In the near future, we're hopefully evaluating bringing those contracted security guards in-house. We would love to have, you know, a little bit more control over that, and there's some hoops to jump through with that process, but that's something we're working toward right now. Great question. Great question.
And maybe tell us, because I think very few ministries have the capacity to have trained security in-house. So, you know,
Sure.
A lot of ministries I've talked to, we either have no security at all, we have maybe a police officer who's showing up occasionally, or we have armed contractors who are coming in. So maybe tell us a little bit about why you guys felt the need to have armed professional security at KARM. So, but then also the flip side of like, where are the limitations that are making you want to pull this in-house?
Great question. This is a 3-hour seminar, right? I've got you guys for 3 hours because no, I'm kidding. That'll take a while. So one of the issues, a lot of places, and even KARM before I got here, had a couple of staff members that they were allowing to carry weapons. And that was kind of part of the security plan, and with the best possible heart and intention. You know, at that point in time, we didn't have the budget for this, and so we're going to have people. Well, the issue with that, in Tennessee, they had a valid carry permit, so they were licensed to carry, so legally, you know, that was fine. My concern, and even when I was in the security consulting world, when you have armed staff, unless you're putting them through a qualification course, you have no idea what that individual is capable of with that weapon platform. So just because they've met a minimum state standard to carry that weapon, you don't know in a high stress environment, you know, with a dense population in close quarters, and if something happens, are they going to be truly an asset? Do they know how to safely deploy that firearm? Can they make the shot? Do they understand what's behind it? Or do they not? You know, law enforcement, we go through extensive training in this more than once a year. I mean, this is not just an annual training. This is something that's drilled in. And sometimes with our best intention to kind of shore up the gap, we like to check boxes. And we'll say, well, we've got a couple of guys, we're going to let them carry their guns, and we can check the security box. If we ever have something bad, they'll handle it. And it's like, well, okay, let's look into that. One, are they actually going to be able to handle it when it matters? And number two, there's a lot of things that need to get handled somewhere between verbal de-escalation and lethal force. You know, one of the things, I'm sorry to keep jumping back and forth, guys. I promise I'll do my best to not do it horribly. Here, can you all see the use of force continuum? Use of force maybe on my screen?
Yep.
I'm not sure, right? You did? Okay, great. So we needed to have, an actual use of force. Same thing law enforcement has, of just expectations for, being present, verbal directives. When are we going to physically restrain someone? Chemical agents, temporary, which would be baton or taser, and then lethal force. And again, stuff. If you just have staff who, a couple of guys who are going to carry pistols, you're missing 80% of your use of force continuum. You've got verbal de-escalation, maybe some physical if they know what to do, and maybe not. And then you've got deadly force, which is not a position you want to put somebody in, especially if they're not trained in what to do with that. So KARM decided that it was important for us. One of the foundational things we had was, if people don't feel safe when they're here, it doesn't matter how great our programs are or what services we provide. If they don't feel safe, they're not going to be here. We're not going to be able to have the impact we want to have with them if they don't feel safe.
And you guys, and based on your guys' situation, armed security was kind of the thing that you needed.
For us, we decided the best way we can help people to feel safe was to have that trained security officer, that armed professional who knows what they're doing, and they can, uniform presence. They de-escalate a lot of stuff. Now, again, we really focused on almost being a concierge level service. They can tell you the times and where to go to the bag room and how to get to this part of the building and services we offer. But we decided to help people feel safe. We wanted to do more than just check a box and say, okay, we got security because someone has a weapon on our campus. So for us, that was armed security. We like most places, we didn't get it right out of the gate. So we started off, we realized we needed more hours and different coverage. We've gone through a lot of security guards. You asked one of the reasons we want to bring it in-house. We would like to be the ones making those hiring decisions. It takes a very special type of security guard, and just because they pass the Tennessee state requirements to be an armed guard doesn't mean that that's the kind of individual we want having interactions with our guests. We take that very seriously. So we're happy with the service we get. We've gone through a couple of different organizations, and we're happy with the contractor we have now. But we really want that extra level of control where we can do even more training and coaching and do the things that we're not able to do today.
All right. Yeah, I think in a minute, I want to get into you with what that training and coaching looks like, because in talking to a lot of ministries, mostly kind of off the record conversations, I think that we have a lot of ministries where the backup is a good guy with a gun who is, a respected member of the staff. And a lot of times we have done some legwork to know that this person has a valid concealed carry permit, but that's about the extent of the vetting process. And, and as you've kind of outlined, that's very concerning, because certainly if a weapon is discharged, there's significant liability on the organization.
There sure can be. I mean, it's simple things to consider. Even legally for that individual, in Tennessee, we're a fairly gun-friendly state. It's not super hard to get that permit. And the issue you run into is you start kind of splitting hairs on what the state requires for an armed security guard. Technically, the minute you carry that gun in defense primarily of a third party in Tennessee, if you're acting as that, you should have an armed guard license. So even if you have an individual, if depending on where you are in your state and your requirements, it gets into a gray area really fast on whether just a permit carrier, if they're designated somewhere to be the responder in the event of emergency, you can have some pretty serious liability concerns organizationally as well as individually with that person. So we definitely have training. So we do. We are.
And before we get that, though, we do have two questions.
Sure.
Ashley from the Mission in Rochester, they have contractors. They like the idea of having a paid staff person who manages this. Can you give us an idea of what kind of a budget? Obviously, at different parts of the country are dramatically different price points. Can you give us some perspective on what we think this might cost administering?
Yeah, absolutely. That's really hard. Obviously, there's a lot of different variables for your organization. A really good first step, if you want someone on security full time there, I would say you can easily find out what some security. Some of the words you might look for are field supervisors are making in that area. So if your typical security guards are making $20 an hour, maybe your field supervisors are making 25. That $25 range would be a really good starting point organizationally if that's kind of the going rate for a field supervisor. So if you want someone on staff, I would recommend not just going with a basic security guard. Get someone who has a little bit bigger picture than that. Again, someone who's had maybe some supervisory experience, a few more years in the industry, and you will be much better served. And again, that someone who's able to do those threat assessments. And we're great here. I've got a fantastic leadership team, and we really work on things together. So it's not just Breck the Lone Ranger drawing safety or security lines in the sand saying this is what we're going to do. Really,
and nor is it Breck who's at the front door every day being like, "You're good, you're good, you're good." I mean, you're not doing any of this security yourself. You're coordinating.
Right. So my job is really to gather data and give it to our senior leadership team to make those decisions they want to go on. So I make a lot of recommendations, like, hey, we ought to evaluate our camera system. This was really antiquated when we came in, and it wasn't doing everything that I know camera systems can do. So I was able to put together a proposal, get some demo equipment in free of charge, and let them see the difference, and then say, hey, what if I told you we could actually reduce guard hours by using analytics, and let's do some cost benefit ratios here and see what we can come up with to more effectively use resources and actually save money in the long run. So
yeah, that's great.
Those are the kind of things, again, it's hard to say exactly what your budget is. I mean, get the best you can afford. But I would recommend really considering it, at least going with that maybe not an ops manager who's had, if you can go for that, absolutely. But someone who's had some supervisory experience, managed other guards on posts would be kind of the first level I would look for.
And then just one brief follow-up question, sort of along these lines, from Christy at the Durham mission. How do your clients react to these security guards? Is it viewed by clients as a positive thing? And I would say that, KARM, I think, has security in an emergency shelter. I don't think we have security at thrift stores, or it's really just at our emergency shelter. How are our clients view this?
Great question. So we were really concerned about that early on, because when we have hard look security guards, they're wearing something that resembles police, right? They've got a badge on and uniform shirt and things and the gun belt. We were really concerned. We didn't want people to be uncomfortable. I'm not going to lie and say it's perfect. A lot of our guests have great relationships with our guards. We're able to help them. We're there to listen. Again, we're the first people they interact with when they come to KARM, right? So the first person a guest is going to interact with their first day at our mission is going to be a security guard before they ever get the chance to interact with staff. And we can't blow that opportunity. So our guests have gotten comfortable with the guards. They know them. They joke. They banter. They know when to be firm. I mean, my guards are good at drawing healthy boundaries and making sure they know, there's things we joke about, there's things we don't. All of our guards do go through boundaries training with us, so we have appropriate relationships with our guests and kind of keep that professional line. Most of our guests, the vast majority of our guests, are really happy that we have security. They feel safer. We have a large outdoor courtyard, seated kind of patio area that people use during the day. And across the street, there is a city-provided safe space where there's rampant drug use and other things, as you find in a lot of city safe spaces. And we find a lot of people who don't even stay here overnight will come into our courtyard because they feel safer with our guards. So it's not an easy thing. I mean, it takes work to build that trust and relationship. But now, guests are comfortable approaching our guards with issues or concerns or getting their opinions. And we're really happy to have worked hard and developed those relationships the way we have.
That's awesome. Thank you. So now after those little, I think those were very helpful. Tell us a little bit more about this training and maybe interspersing, where does this training come from? I think many ministries would be starting from a blank slate, and coming up with this amount of SOP and training is overwhelming. It's daunting.
It sure can be. So, one, just there is help available, right? Like, don't feel like you have to reinvent the wheel, and don't feel like you've got to dump a lot of resources into hiring a professional security consultant to come in and do an assessment for you. Reach out to your local law enforcement. We have a great relationship with KPD here. And one of the first things I did was have a couple of their officers come over and do an assessment with us and say, give me your all's opinions. And, you know, I'm not perfect. I've got blind spots, and help me make sure this is great. For our training, we like to base a lot of what we do off of what our local law enforcement standard is. So what that does is kind of take some of the pressure off of us as trainers. It's not, you know, if something bad ever happens and I now have to justify to a court or a jury, why is this level of training sufficient? Well, if it's training that Breck invented, and well, we thought it was pretty good, and I, you know, found some Google, you know, websites and copied a PowerPoint and thought it was solid. I don't want to have the liability of justifying our standard of training. When local law enforcement is more than happy to share curriculum with us. And most places in the country, you'll find they're more than happy to help. So for our shooting qualification, we mirror what KPD does. Their frequency, their testing standard, that way, should anything ever happen, and they're like, how did you come up with you know, this is the standard of what it is? Well, if it was good enough for KPD, it was good enough for us. And that takes, you know, they're going to vet those testing and training programs much more rigorously than we ever could. And so by kind of borrowing from people is a great way to do it. If you need SOPs for something, James, I hope this is okay. I'm happy to share my contact information. Please feel free, you know, to reach out. We're happy to help each other, right? We all have the same goal. We're here working toward the same objective, and there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. So if you need an SOP around a specific thing, I may not have it, but we'll come up with something that sounds convincing, right? We'll figure it out. If I've got those security directives or those SOPs or policies, right, like the use of force policy on what we have, and you want to use some of that stuff, happy to share it with you. It's not some great, wonderful thing that I invented by myself. We're happy to share that and leverage that kind of stuff together.
Yeah, I just dropped your email in the chat. So if you want to email Breck, you know, Breck he can share with you rather than so yeah, feel free to write him. Breck, is there a way you can share your screen to kind of give us an overview of all the things you're training on? Is that possible?
Sure. Let's get some of this stuff down.
Yeah, I know you've mentioned there's a shooting qualification. I don't know if there's a waiver that folks are signing. You know, you've mentioned, I think, some de-escalation training. And I think it would also be interesting to know if you just say briefly, hey, this is something we train everybody on.
Oh, sure, yeah.
All our shelter staff, or hey, this is just for security. And maybe if you can make this just a little bit bigger. I'm having trouble reading it.
Trying to figure out how to do that.
Oh,
Give me a second.
Yeah, that might be too big. The other, if you go to the bottom left and hit the different view, the bottom right, excuse me, with the lines, that should take us, that's going to be a little bit easier. All right, I can read this. I don't know if anyone else can, but I'm hoping everyone.
So some of the training is specific to guards. Other training is for all of our staff. So last week, we took half of our staff off-site for 2 days. And the first day was really checking a lot of that annual training boxes, right? This week, yesterday, and actually today, the other half of our staff who was here working last week, they're off-site. And that's everyone in our organization, from our care coordinators, frontline staff, our security staff, administration, HR, everyone's going through certain training. So the kinds of trainings that everybody would get, stuff like bloodborne pathogen training, right? So the only threats we have aren't violent, and so we'll do a bloodborne pathogen training, which kind of mushrooms into a little bit more like contact allergies and the risk of fentanyl and different things like that. So any kind of substance training. So all of our staff will go through that. All of our staff goes through de-escalation training. That's really important for us, because it's not just security who needs to be able to de-escalate a situation. And de-escalation by ICE standards is not problem solving. It's not conflict resolution. All we're looking to do is take someone who's in a really heightened emotional state and bring that emotion down a little bit. We just want to, if they're a 10, let's get them to a 7 or an 8. If they're a 7 or 8, let's get them to a 5 or 6. And how do we calm people down? So all of our staff will go through de-escalation training to learn how to, work with people. We do a training around how to respond to people who are having mental health crisis. Or who are having, some kind of substance abuse, intoxication issue. All of our staff goes through training on how to do with that. So, if we have someone, we use radio 10 codes. If we have someone who has self-harm ideations, all of our staff will know the procedure for how to deal with that and how to get them.
Can you tell us where the de-escalation training is coming from? Is this something you guys have developed, or is this from an outside agency?
Great question. The what we train on is KARM specific. It's a program I came up with. There are lots of great de-escalation programs out there. I mean, it's certainly, we're not the only game in town. We kind of tweak ours toward our population, because a lot of standard de-escalation, you start with people at a certain level, and the people we serve, the demographic we're around, don't necessarily have that baseline. They may not be bringing their best to this conversation in this moment. So ours is tailored a little bit toward the population we serve. But hey, you don't have to invent and come up with your own program for everything out of the gate. I mean, if you don't have a de-escalation program today, get something going. There's tons out there you can choose from, free on Google. Just search for Google de-escalation PowerPoints. I'm sure there's plenty of them out there. Do something to start taking those steps. And then once you got it, you can start refining and find stuff you like better and work toward that. But there are certain trainings, like I said, that all of our staff will go through on mental health de-escalation boundaries. So obviously with what we do, we want to make sure we have those professional boundaries with guests, and we don't want to unintentionally do harm. And so all of our staff will go through a boundaries training on what those lines kind of look like. And then certain staff who are more in the high risk category, whether they're KARM staff who might be carrying a firearm or our guards, will go through some additional training. So, we'll have all the standard trainings you would expect around certifications in less lethal. So the OC spray, baton training, taser training, everything the state requires to carry a less lethal item, we do that. There's a firearm qualification. If you're going to carry a firearm on our campus, if you're not staffed, you're going to meet the same standard our guards meet. I need to know that you can handle a firearm with that level of proficiency. So we have failure drills. We use a shot timer. I mean, we try to induce stress to know, again, it's great that Breck's a good guy and wants to carry his pistol to work, but I need to know that you know what to do with that and are confident with that. Have you had retention training? So that's a big one. Not in Tennessee, it only, you kind of check a box for retention. So retention is if someone gets in a fight with me, do I know how to retain my firearm and make sure it doesn't fall into the wrong hands, right? So if they're going to carry a gun, it's really important for us to know they know how to do it. All of our staff goes through CPR training. So we do CPR AED training. Those of us who carry firearms will also go through a stop the bleed. Can we appropriately use a tourniquet? Do we know how to do a little bit more advanced things to stop until first responders can get here. Again, not that we're paramedics and not that we're trying to play one on TV. It's just a reasonable step we can take that, hey, we need to carry some safety gear too, because if something happens, that's going to be necessary. And so many times if they say, you know, in mass casualty situations, they'll run over and ask for, you know, where's your first aid kit? And most of our first aid kits have, you know, Band-Aids and Neosporin, which are not super useful in a bad day kind of event. So other training we have out. I had our, again, in that training we had last week or yesterday, KPD actually came and did an active shooter training. So we have people on staff who could have taught that, but we thought it would be most impactful for the responding agency, the guys who will actually be coming, should we have that worst case scenario, to come talk to us about stuff. And it was great. They did a fantastic job. And it was totally free. So again, if you don't have the capacity to have a full-time safety person on staff, I get it. Lean on those of us in the industry who are happy to help. Talk to your local law enforcement agency, and they're probably willing to provide some help for you. There's a lot of things you can do to take steps to, again, not be the be-all, end-all, we have it all figured out, but let's just take one or two incremental steps to be safer tomorrow than we were today. Can we just figure out how to not let that incident happen again, or how can we prevent this from happening?
That's awesome. Thank you. So one thing I am wondering, we have about 15 minutes left, how many people would be interested in kind of a deeper dive into what you guys are doing with video surveillance? I know a lot of ministries do use video surveillance. I think a lot of ministries use it reactively. So if you can just put in the chat, yeah, we'd love to, and I don't know how much you can show us from your desktop, Breck. I'm assuming you could either tell us, or you could probably show us quite a bit.
Sure can.
So, but yeah, while you do that, yeah, just to kind of summarize, you know, kind of these high level recommendations are, you know, you have to assess your building, your situation. You know, KARM said, you know, we need, for the safety of our guests, we need to have armed security. You know, I don't know of any ministry who right now has armed security on staff. So if you have armed security, they're contracted. So you're doing that assessment, and then there's a lot of, you know, a lot of times you get a contract with the armed security provider, you have them show insurance, but I think what Breck is showing us is you want to be training and interfacing with your contractors so that you can provide the right kind of hospitality experience. And, you know, kind of the cornerstone of risk management is you figure out what you're going to do to deal with your risk, you implement it, and then you're monitoring it to see how does it work. So I'm seeing almost all, yes, Breck, tell us more about your security system. So
yeah,
this already
looks
looks way more interesting than me yammering on. So take it away.
So we use a system called Verkada. Verkada was a game changer to us to go a full, you know, video of an incident once it happens, to how do we prevent it from happening? What can we do to use analytics and alerts and all those things to help us prevent it from ever going there? So I mean, every camera system is going to have nice views and all that. Here, I'll show you an example of one an alert we use regularly. We have an area between our buildings here. Can everyone see what's on my screen? Maybe.
Yep. Yeah,
looks like an alleyway. Like okay. Yeah, so on the right is one of our buildings. On the left is our chapel. We have this little alleyway. You can see the gate. People love to go back there and do various things that require biohazard cleanup afterwards. Let's just leave it at that. So one of the things we use for video, there's a great analytical alert now that anytime someone walks past this gate, if they walk back here, anytime, day or night, it will send an alert to my cell phone, to the guard's cell phone, to my safety coordinator's cell phone, and it'll pop up this image to our frontline staff at the desk. So now we know someone is going back there. We can look at the camera and we can say, oh, that's our maintenance guy, and he's going over there to work on the HVAC unit or something and not worry about it, or we can see someone's going back there and we can go ahead and send an officer around or a staff member around to have a conversation before we get to the cleanup stage of what happens. So using these cameras, Verkada does have facial recognition. It has person follow. So if someone, let's say someone who's suspended from our services gets in our building, I can find that person and it can backtrack through the system to show me how did they get in. So, did a security officer not pay attention as they were scanning and let them in? Did they come in through a different door that someone may have propped open to bring in something or whatever? How did we get there? It can also give me alerts if someone who we create an alert for is picked up on any of our cameras. So we have, not everyone, but we have some people who are violent offenders, and we don't want them anywhere near our property, right? They're criminally trespassed, and there's reasons why they represent a very real and present danger to our staff and guests here. So if they're spotted on any of our cameras, and we have some cameras, I believe this will show you some of them. We have cameras kind of all around our building. If it picks up their face on any of our cameras, it will alert our security guards and let them know, hey, you've got a high threat individual who's somewhere near the perimeter of our building. So even before they get to the front door or they're out, down here, you can see the entrance to our courtyard. We have other cameras with this view as well. Before they ever get here to create an issue, we'll have the chance to know that they're there and address that instead of waiting for an incident to occur. We can search for individuals even if we don't have their face. I can search by shirt color, pant color, looks like a male, looks like a female, has a backpack on or not. So there's a lot of things we can do. We can do object detection. So if someone removes an AED from our cabinet, our camera system knows to watch that in our front desk. And if someone removes an AED, there are certain staff members who will get an alert immediately that AED has been removed. So we know instantly, hey, something big is going on, that this AED has been being removed and not where it's supposed to be. Verkada's great. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Do you have someone sitting looking at these cameras all the time to try to pick up what's going on?
We don't, and the beauty is you don't need to. Back in the good old days of video, you had a security guard sitting there and they had a bank of video monitors, right? And you had to watch all the video all the time. Well, I don't really want to pay someone to just watch screens all the time. That's not the highest and best use of our resources. So by using these alerts, I can have my guards out in the courtyard having conversations with guests, building relationships. They can be doing patrols and walking around. And if one of those predefined events occur, it's going to pop up on their phone and alert them. So then they can look at it. And again, let's say someone's going down that back alleyway we saw before. Well, now they know they need to pull that up and look at it. They'll know that, okay, I need to take a look at whatever's happening here. They've got access on their phone, iPad, desktop, whatever. So if they've got some downtime and they're sitting here doing paperwork, absolutely have the cameras pulled up on the screen. There's no reason not to. But with the analytics, there's no reason to pay someone to just sit there and do nothing but watch cameras when they can be doing a lot of other useful things. And then the cameras can tell us when they need to be watched. I saw a question in the chat. They are constant record. They're not by motion. So our cameras are on constant record. And one of the great things about Verkada, obviously you can have as little or as much storage space as you want to pay for. So, you may choose to have a solid 30 days at all times for every camera, no matter what. But you can also archive video. So we've got archived video that we've pulled. So here's a video. We'll see if it'll play and cooperate for me here. Here it goes. It's loading. So once you archive a video, once you pull it and save it, there's unlimited data storage for videos you save. So not just all video all the time, but I can save every incident we ever have, and I'll never run out of room for that. This says it's playing, but it's sure not, is it?
Okay.
Might not work as well with Teams, but yeah. So storage is great. I would recommend. I mean, you know, base it off of your needs and what you need to do. Oh, here we go. You can see it now. So this guy's having a conversation with someone, and then he ends up throwing something up to a guest on a balcony. So for us, obviously, that's a security concern. That object didn't come through screening, and now I've got video of someone throwing something up. So let's look into that and see what happened there. So there's a lot that video can do. I would recommend a minimum of 30 days storage. That's kind of industry standard. You know, that's if something happened, I want to be able to go back at least 4 weeks and look and see what happened. Longer is great, but you know, it gets expensive. So, but the ability to pull and retain those archives, as many as you want, is really, really useful.
Yeah. No, Breck, I know in one of our conversations you'd shared, and I think maybe in the last year, that weapons have come out twice at KARM. And so maybe, I don't know how much of that you can share, but maybe if you could tell us, you know, obviously you guys looked at video, like what did you learn from those incidents that has kind of changed the way you do things?
So early on, before we had gone to this video system and before we had made a lot of our changes, one of the roughest events I've experienced since I've been here is we had a guest who was stabbed in the head and neck area by another guest in our chapel. It was a random attack. He walked up behind him and just started stabbing. So obviously we had a lot of video footage of that incident, and we were able, you know, our guards, we had a staff response that was beautiful. Our guards were on site in less than 40 seconds. I can't ask for a better response time than that. As the perpetrator was fleeing, he still had the knife, the weapon in his hand, and he did try to grab someone else. At that point in time, my guard deployed his firearm, did not fire. Deployed for us just means removed from holster. And the person decided to drop the knife and run away. Because of the video we had, he was caught up the street less than 7 minutes later, and I was pulling video for the first responders. So what did we learn by watching this? Well, my first concern is we are a weapon-free facility. So how did that knife get in? And so I was able to go back and watch him as he came into our building. It was his first time, and so he had a larger bag that was going to go down to our bag room, and my guards searched that bag. Well, what my guard did was take that larger bag and set it up on the table to do that search, and the guest walked around the metal detector instead of through it. And because he was searching the bag first and not the person, my guard didn't catch that he walked around the metal detector instead of through it. So that's how he got the knife into the facility. So obviously, okay, now I need to do some training around. We always need to make sure that we screen the individual first. I mean, basic, you know, a law enforcement, traffic stop, any kind of scenario, we're always going to search the person first and secure them before we search objects and things. So we were able to say, this is a training opportunity. We dropped the ball, and that's horrible, but what do we do to ensure that this doesn't happen again? And so this was a training failure. We were able to shore that up, put everyone through some remedial training, and now everyone knows, hey, no one ever walks around this way. We always leave your bag there, walk through, we'll screen you, you wait on this side, then we'll get your bag. So that's an example of, you know, not something I'm happy about. Obviously, the victim ended up being okay. He was released from the hospital the next day and was okay. So, but it certainly could have been much, much worse. And we're very grateful we haven't had more serious incidents than what we've had here.
That's great. Thank you. We are running right up to the end of our time together. And as you know, this is just kind of the tip of the iceberg. Breck has really generously said he's available if you want to email him to share documents or pick his brain a little bit. But hopefully this discussion helps helps you as you have a similar discussion at your ministry. I really do think in talking to a lot of ministries, this is an emerging topic where ministries are really trying to wrap their arms around what do we do to make this safer, given that we have limited resources. There was an age where no missions had metal detectors, and I think that age has passed. But yeah, Breck, any sort of final thoughts, especially for maybe smaller ministries who are just trying to kick this off?
Sure. So again, don't feel like you've got to accomplish everything. We can all do something to take that one step to be better tomorrow than we are today. So tap into those local resources, find people who are willing to help, and do what you can. And if you're a smaller ministry, or even if you're a large ministry and this isn't a part of your budget right now, I get it. Take some steps and say, maybe it's have we had a conversation with our staff about what to do with XYZ? Could we have law enforcement come in and walk the buildings with us and tell us, how are they going to respond? Have we had that initial conversation? I mean, there's a lot you can do that requires $0 to make yourself and your ministry safer. And ultimately, that's what we all want to do.
That's tremendous. Thank you so much. Let's see. I don't know if Ashley is making a comment or asking a question. I should have had my chat pulled up, but yeah, Breck, thank you so much for, oh yeah, eat an elephant one bite at a time. That's right. That's right.
Exactly.
This is the elephant. So yeah, if any of you are interested in a recording, email me, email John. It'll take us a day or two to get this up onto our private YouTube site, but then we can just send you the link and you or someone else can watch the YouTube video if that would be helpful, or email Breck, Ellison@karm.org. Breck, thanks again so much for sharing some of your and KARM's expertise in this space, and thanks for your innovation in this area.
Happy to.
All right. Take care, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. God bless you all.